Hi everybody, this is a trombone here. This is the oldest of all the brass instruments that remains more or less unchanged since its invention somewhere around 1250. The old French name for it was sac-butte. It comes from the French sacre-butter, which means push me and pull you, which is where the slide comes from. And because of the slide, it's the earliest brass instrument to be chromatic. In its history, it was also a sacred instrument in the time of Mozart. It was only used in ceremonial, Masonic or religious music, and it was Beethoven who was the person we have to thank for the fact that any of us have any employment, because he put us in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in the last movement, and that was the first mainstream secular piece that used the trombone. So thanks, Ludwig, for that one. So you make a note in the same way you do with all brass instruments, but obviously the slide is the thing that distinguishes us. The basic compass of the instrument goes from a low E, below the bass clef, one ledger line, up to a top B flat, 4 ledger lines above the bass clef. If you are pushed, you can go a bit higher than that, as I'll demonstrate, but that's a good working compass. Stretches the register up to a top E flat. Wouldn't recommend you use that under normal circumstances. It's for special effects only. There are also a pedal register of the trombone, which go from pedal B flat in first position. You will be advised to avoid all of those apart from the pedal B flat, to be honest. They take a bit of cranking of the trombone downwards to get those notes out. So give us a bit of space, don't jump around to pedal notes, only use them if needed. You will have noticed also that there was a gap. I've just taken the slide off the end. There's a gap between the low E, beneath the bass clef, 1 ledger line, and the pedal B flat, 2 ledger lines below the bass clef. That is a gap in the harmonic series. Most trombones historically didn't have this valve section here. And that valve section was invented about 140 years ago, and it fills in that gap, all except the B natural. So most trombone players have this, but if you write for notes between that low E and the pedal B flat, not the B natural, because that doesn't exist, if you write for that, do specify on the trombone part that it's for trombone with F attachment. In terms of special effects for a trombone and extended techniques, the most obvious one that everybody writes for a trombone is the glissando. Though I don't think I'm alone in the trombone world in finding glissandi a little bit of a chestnut with trombones. People see a trombone and think, oh, I'll put a glissando in. So only use it if you think it's really important. Stravinsky did a brilliant glissando in the Firebird suite. And if you do use the glissando, make sure that it is one that works with the way the harmonic series works. So you can slide from the low E to a B flat, and then the next harmonic up you can slide from a B natural to an F, and the next harmonic up from an E, etc. So make sure that the glissando actually works with the way the harmonic series works. So that's the glissandos dealt with. Other special effects which are common to all brass instruments include the flutter tongue, which is where you roll your R's while you blow. Doesn't sound very nice at all, and it is slightly dependent on your genetic ability to either roll your R or not. So yeah, it's effective in certain contexts. Multiphonics you can do on a trombone. It works better on instruments like the trombone, the French horn and the tuba, where the mouthpiece is deeper, because if you try and sing and play with a shallow mouthpiece like the trumpet, it sounds a bit weird. Again, only use this if you really need to, but that's achieved by singing a note and playing at the same time. And there are certain harmonics, it works well on tenths, so if you play a low B flat and sing a tenth above it, but for ensemble writing, you probably want to give that a miss. Other effects which are commonly used for brass include air noises. So if you want to sound like the sea, people quite often write blow through the instrument with no pitch. which can sound a bit like this. And that sounds quite nice in the abstract, but in the context of the quintet, there generally is too much noise going on, you can't hear it. So if you want that effect, you have to allow the brass player time to invert their mouthpiece so that you get a proper C-side sound. And then when you want them to play normally again, to replace their mouthpiece into the lead pipe. You can hear it immediately, makes it hugely louder. And the final special effect I can think of that's not often used but is quite effective is called slap tongue, which is where you blow very, very hard and then at the last moment block the air with your tongue, and it's normally notated with an X at the end of the note stem and also slap tongue written on it, and that sounds a bit like this. So it's kind of an ugly sound. And then the next thing we come to is mutes. There are many mutes for the trombone, as there are for all the brass instruments except the tuba and the French horn, which have a very limited number, but the trombone and the trumpet have lots of mutes. Again, be sparing with these, use them for a genuine musical effect rather than because you lose sight of what you're trying to achieve compositionally. They're a nice effect, but think of the substance before you start dressing it up with mutes. So I'll introduce you to the different mutes. This is the most common one, and it's known as a straight mute, for the obvious reason that it's straight. And it doesn't actually make the trombone quieter, it just changes the timbre a little bit. So I'll demonstrate that. So that's kind of a tinny, metallic sort of sound. And then, stand up again, and then we have a cup mute, so-called because it looks like a cup, kind of looks like a cup. And that makes a more soft, more sweet sort of sound. It's worth noting with a cup that you can notate it with a closed cup or an open cup. And if you put the cup all the way to the bell, it makes kind of a different sound, and that's known as a closed cup. So that gives you a little idea about cup mutes. Moving on to the next one, I'm kind of going in descending order of commonness. Next one is the Harmon mute. I'm sorry, this one's a little battered. I've had it since I was 14, which is at least 3 years. And this is, Harmon mute or wah-wah mute. And it makes a distinctive sound without the wah-wah as well. The next mute, again in descending order of commonness, is a bucket mute. Penultimately, we come to the solo tone mute. This is a sort of Tommy Dorsey era jazz mute, very, very, very rarely used in orchestral playing, so much so that there are plenty of professional trombone players who don't actually own one. So this is the plunger mute, probably one of my favourite ones. This is literally just the top of a sync plunger. It's nothing expensive here, it's just a rubber top of a sync plunger with a wooden handle taken off it. And this dates back to Ellington. Ellington's lead trombone player, Lawrence Brown, was a really amazing exponent of plunger, and it's a very talkative sound. And in Ellington era, they often paired it with what's called a pixie mute, which goes right inside the bell, like this, and sounds a little bit like this. So the role of the trombone in the quintet depends on the person who's arranging or writing for the quintet. Malcolm Arnold, in his very famous Quintet No. 1, pairs the trumpets together and he pairs the French horn and the tuba together, and then the trombone is sort of bombastic interrupter of proceedings with big sort of loud interjections throughout. So the relationship with the horn and the trombone is an interesting one in the quintet because we have a significant overlap in pitch. The horn is more comfortable higher than the trombone is, but we do overlap. So if in your search to write in a way that isn't extremely exhausting for us, the horn and the trombone, can be used where their pitches, their tessitura overlaps. They can be used as a way of dovetailing parts to give one of us a break. The horn, the horn players' embouchure will get tired quicker than the trombone players because their mouthpiece is smaller, and so they have to have a sort of tighter thing. So the trombone probably has slightly more stamina than the horn overall in terms of longevity of playing, unless you put the trombone very high, of course. The horn has abilities which you'll hear about in a minute to do other things, but yes, we blend well with the horn generally. So the most traditional way for a quintet to be seated is with the two trumpet players on the outside, and as you face the stage, the horn player on the left, the tuba in the middle, and the trombone on the right. And that works well because a lot of brass writing is very antiphonal. You'll hear in the Malcolm Arnold Quintet how the trumpets duel with each other, and it's nice to have them in a kind of stereo effect. However, that's by no means a rule. A lot of quintets sit differently with two trumpets sitting together. A lot of quintets go through phases of standing up, and actually, depending on the repertoire, sometimes one or two of our pieces in the repertoire have very protracted French horn solos with quite busy accompaniments, and because the horn bell faces backwards, it can be quite difficult for the horn to get heard sometimes. So we sometimes swap round with our French horn player comes and sits on the stage. As you look at the stage on the left, on the outside seat, so the bell points into the audience, and so the horn player has to work slightly less hard to make themselves heard.